Yesterday we saw that sometimes miracles, in addition to communicating something in their own character, teach about the nature of the non-miraculous. We saw that in the 6 plagues in Egypt, which were supernatural enhancements of otherwise natural processes, which then led to the speculation that maybe when it seemed that nature was operating prior and afterwards, it really was divine. And even more so in the case of Megillas Esther, where events that took place, which would be naturally interpreted as ordinary, unguided, accidental, later, when the factors dovetailed so as to save Mordechai's life, to save the Jews, go back and retrospectively judge that, in fact, they were guided, they were managed, and through that experience you come to at least speculate that other times when things happen and they look as if they're just random or accidental or unmanaged, it may be that there's something behind them that's really moving them in a particular direction without us being aware of it. So that the miracle leads to a lesson about what we would call the non-miraculous. Now, I have to insert a footnote here because I was using this vocabulary last time, and I'm going to continue to use it today, but there's another way of using these words, and people are aware of it, and it can be confusing. So I want to try to clarify that at the outset, and then we'll take what we learned yesterday and apply it to specifically to Chanukah. The word nes, or miracle, has 2 meanings. It could be in the same book by the same author on different pages with the different meanings. So you have to be very aware of this, and just whenever you see the word, ask yourself which meaning is intended. The meaning I have been using, and I will continue to use, is an event which any honest, intelligent, open-minded observer would have to regard as divine agency. An event that demands recognition of divine agency. So, you are with the Jews who have left Egypt, and you are camped out at the border of the Red Sea, and on one side there are mountains, and on the other side there are mountains, and the Egyptian army is bearing down on you. And you're yelling for help. And Moses says, don't worry. So what, Moses, don't worry. We're slaughtered. It's over. There's nothing we can do. Moses says, don't worry. You're going to cross the sea. Really, Moses, about 1,000 years from now, there's going to be someone who claimed he did that and took a stroll on the sea. But we know that that's not possible. What are you talking about? And then Moses sticks out his hand with the staff, and the sea splits, and they walk across on dry land, and then the Egyptians come to pursue them, and the water crashes down on them and drowns them. Now, if you're there and you see that, and you go that, you cannot avoid, if you are reasonable, you cannot possibly avoid concluding that this was a matter of divine agency. There was a reasonably famous philosopher in the 20th century, Alfred Jules Ayer, British philosopher, whose mother was Jewish, who at one point in his career said, if I had been present at Sinai and witnessed the revelation, I would have gone to the nearest psychiatrist because that would have proved that I'm crazy. Because I know there's no God. I know that. So if I had this experience, it must be just that I'm crazy. That's not open-minded. That's not reasonable. And later on, he changed his mind about certain things in a much more reasonable way. You have certain beliefs, certain understanding of the world, but if you are an empiricist, as he claimed to be, when you have a new experience, you have to stop and think, maybe I made a mistake. Otherwise, we'll never make progress. The crossing of the Red Sea is an event which could not possibly be denied as divine agency. One use of the word miracle is for events like that. And that is framed in halacha in the following way. The halacha is that if you go past a place in which you experienced a miracle, there's a blessing to make. Thanking and praising God for the miracle that he did to you in that place. Understandably, that's very rare because people very rarely have events that stand out in that way. If you happen to have had such an event, every time you go past the place, you make that blessing. If you do, come to a place which is recognizable as a place where the Jewish people experienced a miracle, you can also make a bracha. This makes miracles very rare and very obvious, unmistakable. That's one use of the word. Another use of the word is what you find in the Siddur, where it talks about miracles that surround us continuously, every day, evening, morning, and afternoon. Boy, that is not the same use of the word. These things that I just described are very, very rare. This verse is telling me now that we're surrounded by miracles all the time. That's a different use of the word. There, the word miracle means roughly an event that's the result of direct divine agency, whether you see it or not, whether you realize it or not. The divine agency can be hidden, but it's direct divine agency. To distinguish it from the idea of nature being set up and nature running on its own, and then God interfering from time to time, but the nature just flows on without any help from the outside. I'm not endorsing that idea. I'm not even endorsing it as a Jewish idea in anyone's vocabulary, but sometimes the word miracle comes to contradict that, to say that no, the event was an event of divine agency, and then the Siddur is telling us, in fact, we are surrounded by miracles all the time because everything that happens to us is direct divine agency, whether we see it or not. Now, the difference between the two meanings is brought out by the Ramban, among others, who talk about hidden miracles. If you speak of hidden miracles, you have to have the second meaning in mind. According to the first meaning, a hidden miracle is a contradiction in terms. Since miracle means something which is undeniably divine agency, it couldn't be hidden. According to the second, where miracle just means direct divine agency, but without being revealed or not, then it could be, there could be such a thing as a hidden miracle. So you have to be careful to understand what the difference in the vocabulary is. And that will come out as we now talk about the story of Chanukah. I've been using the word miracle in the first sense, an event that's unmistakably divine. And now I'm going to show you how that plays out in the context of Chanukah. We're together so far? Okay, yeah.
I just wanted to ask what bracha a person makes in a place that he himself experienced something that he can sense.
I think the text of the bracha is she'asa li nes b'makom hazeh. He made a miracle for me in this place, if I'm not mistaken. So now, we started off by saying that Chanukah commemorates two events. Now I'm going to try to be careful with my vocabulary. Two events: the war and the miracle of the oil. And we asked the question, why is it that in the liturgy, the miracle of the oil is almost not mentioned at all? It may be absent entirely, or in one ambiguous tiny phrase that we lit lamps in your holy courtyards, which might refer to the menorah, might not refer to the menorah. Why is it almost completely absent? And I told you the Maharal's answer, that the purpose of the oil is to cast an explanation, an interpretation of the events of the war. Now, to say that they're not accidental, they weren't random, they weren't purely naturalistic, they were the result of direct divine providence. How does a miracle do this? In the other two cases, in the case of the plagues in Egypt, in the case of Purim, you had a sequence of events which led you directly to thinking that more is there than just the events show. In the case of the plagues in Egypt was the rest of the natural processes. And in the case of Purim, it was the prior political events. Here, if you look carefully at the structure of the miracle of the oil and at the structure of the battles, you could see a direct connection. First of all, who initiated the war? It was the priests, the Kohanim. And they did it because certain events took place which simply were intolerable. Whether it was Matisyahu, who was required to participate in a sacrifice to idol worship, or it was the idol worshippers' sacrifices that they performed in our temple, or it was the decree that before marriage the bride would have to go to the local Greek governor. Certain things happened which made it intolerable for them to abide and caused them to spark a rebellion. But the ones who sparked the rebellion were the priests. And it was the attack on Jewish worship that inspired them. Now, the war took place over a period of months. The conquest of Jerusalem took place in the middle. It wasn't the end of the war. The war continued on. They took Yerushalayim, they cleaned out the temple, and they lit the menorah, and immediately there was a miracle in the menorah in the temple. Says the Maharal, the message here is that you fought for the sake of purifying the service of God. God is showing you that that was something that he appreciates, by doing something for your ability to serve him. But it's more than that. So they found one container of pure oil. What would they have done if they had found no pure oil? The answer is they would have lit impure oil. Oil does not have to be pure. Tuma hutra b'tzibur. So the miraculous preservation of one container of oil was not to make the mitzvah possible. The mitzvah was possible anyway. It was to make the mitzvah perfect. It was to make it what we call in Hebrew mahadrin, on the highest possible level. Now, let's compare that with the war. When there are non-Jews who have conquered the land and who are running the land, and even if they enforce on Jews laws that cause them to break the laws of the Torah, there is no requirement to make a war against them. That's not required, not demanded. The one thing you can do is you can hide. The mitzvahs that you do, you don't have to do them in public, in your face. And put on tefillin at home. Want to keep Shabbos? Just stay out of sight. Keep Shabbos where nobody's looking and won't notice and report you. And if someone catches a Jew and says to him, I'm a Greek, the law is you have to violate the laws of the Torah, then the rules, of course, you have to die to sanctify God's name. Nowhere is it written that you have to start a war. And indeed, the Greek oppression lasted for 52 years. And for a long time, these laws were in force, and there wasn't a rebellion. It was a point at which the Greeks did something that was such an abomination, so degrading, that instinctively they couldn't take it anymore. So really, the whole effort in fighting the war was to be able to serve God in the best possible way, not just to be able to serve him, because they could have fulfilled the rules of serving him without making the war. And they risked their lives for it. So just like they, in making the war, were looking for a higher level that wasn't strictly speaking required, so the miracle made possible doing the mitzvah in a higher level in a way that wasn't strictly speaking required. And by the way, the commentators point out that you have a situation in the midst of lighting the menorah that's unlike any other halacha that we have in the entire Torah. Very often in the Torah, there are two levels. There's the best way to do the mitzvah, and then if you are not able or you fail to do it in the best way, you can satisfy the mitzvah by doing less. It's called mahadrin, and not without mahadrin. This mitzvah of lighting the menorah is the only mitzvah in the entire Torah which has the ordinary level, and then it has mahadrin, and then it has mahadrim and mahadrin. There's three levels. It's the only one. And the way it works out is this. The basic mitzvah is one light per family, per house, per night. One a night. That means for the entire family in the entire house, 8 candles the whole Chanukah. That's it. Then, there are 2 different ways to enhance the mitzvah. One is each night to add an extra candle. I'm saying candle. Oil is better, but I'm just saying candle. So that would mean 1 the first night, 2 the second night, 3 the third night. The other way to enhance the mitzvah is each person in the house should light his own menorah. That is mahadran. That's an improved way to do the mitzvah. It's a question between Ashkenaz and Sephardi, which one is the first level of improvement. And the highest level is to do both. Everyone lights and everyone adds a new one every night. Why is it that this mitzvah has 3 levels, whereas many other mitzvahs have 2 and many mitzvahs have only 1? The answer is because it wants to put the stamp of mahadran. It isn't so hard to have everyone light a menorah and everyone have an extra candle every night. Yes, there were times when poverty was much more widespread and it was more difficult, but it isn't a gigantic expense and a gigantic sacrifice to do it. And then everybody has opportunity to do a mitzvah in a superb fashion, because the miracle was for the sake of the superb fashion of doing the mitzvah, not for the sake of doing the mitzvah simply or not doing the mitzvah. Moreover, what kind of oil did they find? They found 1 container of pure oil. How did they know it was pure? The laws of Tumah are very extensive. Even a closed container might be impure. No, they found it buried. And they found it buried with the signature of the Kohen Gadol. Now, the signature is very important because not all oil is kosher for the menorah. Not even all oil that can be used for other purposes in the temple is kosher for the menorah. Menorah is the very highest quality of oil. For example, you have menachos. Menachos are meal offerings, some kind of grain offerings, flour, and you mix it with oil. That oil can't be used for the menorah. So you want to know that it's the very highest. So that they identify by the signature of the Kohen Gadol. Now, what was the Kohen Gadol doing signing oil bottles? I mean, what did he have a financial interest in selling oil? I mean, what exactly, how did that work exactly? One explanation is this. As we said, if you're going to offer a mincha, then that could be a lower grade oil. This Kohen Gadol had a special hidur in the way that he did his work. Kohen has to offer a meal offering every day. He used for his meal offerings the quality of oil that was appropriate for the menorah. He didn't have to do that. He did it. He was the only one who did it. That's why he signed the bottles. Because his oil that he would use for his meal offering was only the highest quality, and therefore it had to be identified as his. That's what they found. They found that container of oil that he had signed. Now, what is he doing? He's doing his mitzvah in the best possible way. So you have the triangle of the best possible oil for the best possible mitzvah in the face of a war that was fought for the sake of serving God in the best possible way. If you're living through this and you notice these details dovetailing, you think to yourself, there's the miracle of the oil is expressing the nature of our effort. Whether it's our effort in the war or it's the effort of that Kohen Gadol in doing his meal offerings in the best possible way, it all fits together. There's obvious symbolism here that fits together. Furthermore, on the most simple level, the war was fought with not enough soldiers. In any natural terms, you wouldn't have expected, again, as I pointed out yesterday, there are guerrilla wars that succeed. There are many guerrilla rebellions that are put down. You wouldn't have expected victory. And yet, the small number of untrained guerrilla warfare soldiers was able to overcome the larger army. Here, there was too little oil. Only enough oil for one night. And it lasted for 8 nights. So it's again too little doing a job that's too big for it because it's too small. So that too is what's had in common between the oil and the war. So if you're fighting the war and you come to Jerusalem, you conquer Jerusalem, you clean out the temple, and then you light it, and you have this miracle, and the details dovetail in that way, you see that as a communication, not just something extra or something different. And there's a final element here, which is based on two sources that I will explain to you. One is this. The Rambam, Maimonides, records that the date on which the Jewish forces captured the city of Jerusalem was the 25th of Kislev. Indeed, it became a kind of usage of the word. We call the name of the holiday Chanukah. Chanu means to come to rest, to encamp, and then there's Kafeh, which is 25. So they rested or came to encamp on the 25th day of Kislev. Okay, so now you conquer the city on the 25th, clean out the temple, you set up the menorah. When are you going to light the menorah? At night. What date is that? That night. It's the 26th. So the 8 days that the menorah burned was starting on the night of the 26th. But we start lighting the menorah on the night of the 25th. Why do we do that? Okay, that's one good question. Then there is the famous question of the Beis Yosef. This is an infamous question. Years ago they used to say there are 300 answers, now they say there are 1,000 answers. And the question is this. You found a cruse of oil that had enough oil to last one night. And it burned 8 nights. How big is the miracle? Isn't it 7 nights? Because you had enough for one night naturally. So if you are celebrating the miracle by lighting the menorah generation after generation, if the menorah that we light is supposed to celebrate the miracle, we ought to light 7 nights, not 8 nights. So why do we light 8 nights? There are many answers to this question. One answer is what I told you before, considering it a miracle to have found the one cruse of oil that was left that wasn't disturbed by the Romans, by the Greeks. So that could be one of the 8 nights. But it doesn't explain why we light a night early. And the explanation that's given is that the first night we light for the war. Because that first night, the 25th, that's the day on which we took Yerushalayim, recaptured the temple, and cleaned it out. So the first one is for the war. And then the 7 nights subsequently are for the extra burning of the oil. If that's the case, then you have a direct expression of the implication of the oil for the war in the way in which the mitzvah was set up. When they set up the mitzvah the following year and said, light it on the night of the 25th, they're telling you, understand that the fact that this miracle took place with the oil was to teach us what the nature of the war was. Okay? So this is how, this is the end of the sequence of public miracles in Jewish history, where this idea is communicated. Now, I've said over and over again, I've tried to be careful, that what it teaches us is that the war was divine providence. So that although you're going through it and you're sleeping in the mountains and hiding in the caves and then coming down in the middle of the night to attack the Greeks when they're unsuspecting, and little by little you're driving them back and more people are joining you because they're inspired by you, you have to realize, and this is what the miracle of the oil teaches, don't think you were doing it alone. Don't think it was just your strategy and just your efforts that turned the tide. It was really divine providence that was aiding you the whole process. It teaches you that, just like the other sets of miracles that we talked about taught you what you might have thought was natural is really divine providence. So here too, it teaches you that it's really divine providence. Having said that, and that is, I've said, I think, in one vocabulary, which I think is consistent, you'll then take a look at Al Nisim, and you'll say, but The word miracle is used over and over again in the text to refer to the war. Al Hanisim, for the miracles, it starts out. And then it describes the war in great detail. Now that's true. That's the other sense of the word miracle. There, the word miracle means something that's direct divine causation, not something that happens by itself. So in that sense, we do call it a miracle, and we thank God for it as a miracle, but you have to understand that that's the other sense of the word miracle. So that's why I told it to you that way, because the word has two senses. Okay? We're together? Now, having said all of this, there is a great deal to learn from the way in which the miracle took place, what its character was. There are many explanations as to how the miracle could have taken place. I'm going to base myself now on one of them, and that is that, of course, they filled the menorah the first night with all the oil they had. That's the way the mitzvah needs to be done. There's no thought of dividing it up, and of course, they couldn't know how long it was going to be until pure oil was going to be produced. They filled it up because that's the way the mitzvah should be done, and what will happen tomorrow will happen. And the oil burned more slowly. Burned more slowly than oil normally burns. This does not have to convert it the way the Brisker Torah goes, that you have to worry. It doesn't convert it into miracle oil, and it's not olive oil anymore. If that's true, they said, then you can't light it because miracle oil isn't kosher for the menorah. Only olive oil is kosher for the menorah. Okay, that's true. It's an interesting question. But Kodesh Baruch Hu can do a miracle that olive oil with the same molecules will burn more slowly. That was the miracle. Okay. Now there's a difference of opinion, which you probably have heard of, between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, how we should light the menorah. Should we start, as we do, with 1 the first night, 2 the second night, and increase every night? That's Beis Hillel's position. Or should we start with 8 and decrease every night? That's Beis Shammai's position. What's going on? What is the thought of Beis Shammai, and why does Beis Hillel not agree? Now, Rav Zevin wrote a sefer called Moadim B'Halacha, Holidays in Jewish Law, and he gives the following explanation, which he takes from certain sources. And again, this wouldn't be necessarily the only explanation, but this explanation is one of the traditional explanations and has, I think, a lot to teach us. Beis Shammai analyzed the situation as follows. The oil is burning more slowly. So the miracle has already taken place in converting this oil into something which burns more slowly. Again, not changing the molecules, but it's been given a quality that it burns more slowly. The miracle is a one moment shot. The oil changes its character. On the first night, how much miracle oil do you have? On the first night, you have 8 nights worth of miracle oil. That's how long it burns. So since the miracle converted the oil into 8 nights of oil, light 8 candles on the first night to commemorate the miracle that you have on the first night. On the second night, you only have 7 nights worth of miracle oil left, so light 7, and so forth. Because you are commemorating with your lighting of the menorah the inner essence of the miracle. The inner essence is to convert the nature of the oil into something that will burn more slowly. Now, Beis Hillel says that the practice is what we do, to add each night. And here it's very important to understand how Beis Hillel looks at Beis Shammai's idea. Beis Hillel says, you're right. The essential miracle is in the changing of the character of the oil. That's quite correct. But we don't celebrate the inner, invisible change. What we celebrate is the outer, visible effect. And on the first night, it burned for 1 night. Okay, if you happen to go in, if you're a Kohen and happen to go in and check the menorah and see, wow, there's a lot of oil left over, that's certainly impressive. And of course, very few people knew that. But then, second night, what are they going to do? They had 1 container of oil, 1 night's container. What are they going to do tonight? They lit it again? How did they do that? They lit it from the same oil? Again? second night, and then a third night, and then a fourth night, and then a fifth night. Each night it becomes more and more powerful, more and more shocking, more and more surprising. More talk about it, more thought about it. What could it possibly mean? How long is it going to go on? Will we ever need more oil? Maybe we'll just leave this forever. So Beis Hillel says that it's the outer visible expression that we celebrate, not the inner essential change. Now this idea that it's the outer expression is a very deep idea in the way in which we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the way Jewish values work. And I'll give you a few illustrations of it to show you that Beis Hillel is coming from a whole context of this kind of thought. Moses is on Mount Sinai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is communicating to him the contents of the Torah, and the last day he gives them the tablets. The people at the very end make the golden calf. God says to Moses, Lech reid kishicheitz amcha, go, get down from the mountain, because your people has done destructively. So now the oral tradition comments as follows: go, get down. What does get down mean? I think what's motivating the oral tradition here is this. Imagine a mountain. You could have a mountain range, but if you have a single mountain which has a top, you're standing on the top. If you go, you're going down. Whichever way you go, you're going down. So someone says go, of course you're going down. So why would the Torah say go, get down? So the Torah, the oral tradition comments, go down from your greatness. Reid migduloscha. Go down from your greatness. Why should Moses go down from his greatness? Why? Now here's the essential idea. Moses had certain qualities which are unique in the whole history of mankind, more so than the patriarchs, and more so than anyone who comes afterwards, including the Messiah. If you've heard differently, you have to change your mind. How did he become so great? So I thought, where we come from is, he worked real hard. Okay, he worked very hard, and he had certain natural gifts that Kodesh Baruch Hu gave him, and he made himself great. But we don't accept that idea. All we have under our control is our efforts. The outcome is always due to God. Whether it's success of our efforts or failure of our efforts, it's always a divine response to our efforts. We don't have circumstances under our control. We can't force outcomes to take place. Because Baruch is responding to the efforts that we put forward. So, Moses made gigantic efforts in developing himself, and Kodesh Baruch Hu crowned his efforts with success. Okay? By the way, this is similar to the idea of prophecy. There are certain things that a person has to do to prepare himself for prophecy. Maimonides says explicitly that a person who does prepare and fully prepared doesn't guarantee he'll have prophecy. That's a divine decision. He gets great credit for preparing himself, but whether he has a prophecy or not depends upon whether Kodesh Baruch Hu has a purpose in giving him prophecy. Okay, so now the question will be, why did God crown Moses' efforts with success? Was it because God appreciated his efforts and wanted to reward him? No. God crowned his efforts with success because with that success, with that greatness, he could do something for the Jewish people. He could affect them in a certain way, teach them, inspire them. Now that they've created the golden calf and committed that terrible crime, they can't receive from you anymore. That greatness that you have, that greatness that I gave you, they can't access it. They can't respond to it. So you lose it. Because that's why I gave it to you. I only gave it to you for what it could do for them. So again, the inner efforts that Moses made and the inner elevation that he achieved, we don't celebrate that. What we celebrate is what he could do with it to elevate the Jewish people. To the extent that if they can't receive from him anymore, then he loses it. It's a very, very dramatic illustration of the importance of the interchange being expressed and understanding that it's for the sake of the expression that takes place. Another example, the Akedah, when God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, when he's on his way to the mountain, he leaves the servants behind, and he and Yitzchak go up, and of course he's ready to do it, and then God calls it off at the last moment, and then God promises him great blessings because he was willing to be prepared to sacrifice his son. And then it says that Abraham came back, and he went together with his servants to Beersheba. Went together with them. So you might wonder, why does it bother to tell me they went together? What would you have thought? They'd go separately? They're his servants after all. Of course they have to travel him and attend to him. And especially since the word together appears 3 times in the story in a very peculiar fashion. When they leave Beersheba to go to the Akedah, to the sacrifice, it doesn't say they went together, the 4 of them. Abraham, Isaac, and the 2 servants. When they get to the mountain, as Abraham and Isaac are walking up the mountain, it says twice that they go together. Which, again, is quite unnecessary. There's a whole long explanation of why that is. And then, when Abraham comes down, it says he went together with the boys back to Beersheba. So the word together here is playing a very heavy role, and each one has to be explained. Cohen Cook explained the last one as follows. Abraham is coming down from one of the greatest spiritual exercises in the history of mankind. The willingness to sacrifice Isaac, as far as I know, in every edition of the Siddur, it's printed at the beginning of the Siddur. Not every chapter in Genesis or the book of the 5 books of Moses printed in the Siddur. But that is such a foundational story, many people wanted to say it every day. Can he be together with servants? Or has he become spiritualized beyond the possibility of being together with servants? The Torah is telling you that he can be together with them, and from this it's consistent with the idea that the purpose of having that great elevation is to be able to be together with people much lower than you are, so as to be able to elevate them as well. This is not a trivial idea. It's not an obvious idea. Lahavdil elef havdolos bein Torah l'tomei. There is one of the world's famous great religions, where the founder of the religion introduced a type of meditation to avoid suffering in a certain way. And if you meditate, they say, according to his prescription, you achieve a kind of state of ecstatic consciousness of the highest possible integration with the universe and pleasure and so forth and so on. And he achieved it for himself. And then he broke off to come back and teach other people. For that religion, it's a problem. Why did he do that? He's there in nirvana. He's up. He's disconnected from this world, attached to that world. He's in the ideal state. Why did he break off and come back to teach others? For them, that's a question, a problem to figure out why that is. For us, la'avdul, it's not a question, it's ABCs. Of course. The elevation that you achieve is for the sake of what it can do for others. If it doesn't do something for somebody else, then you don't deserve it. Like Moses, who lost it when he came down from the mountain because of the golden calf they couldn't receive from him. Now this, I think, puts a kind of obligation on us. We go through periods of inspiration, and of course, if you're a spiritually sensitive person, you're thankful for it. You thank God for it, and you pray that it should happen again, and you treasure it. But you have to ask yourself also, what am I going to do with this? How can other people benefit from what it is that has happened to me? Whether it's a certain insight into prayer, or the thrill of experiencing Lechadoidi, or the elevation of getting a piece of Torah correctly, and to get an insight into the way the Torah works, the question is, how can you use that to help other people? It's something which, those of you who know me probably have heard from me a number of times. and it's something that's thrilling to me. And I recite it over because I want other people to realize it's available. The number of times that I have a question, I've had questions for decades, and suddenly I find an answer. And I think to myself, it was good that I didn't forget the question. Questions are precious. Don't forget them, write them down, hold on to them. Ask people. And then it's another confirmation. It was there all the time. I was just ignorant, I hadn't seen it. And the tradition proves itself over and over again. That it has the answers to the questions. It has the resilience to respond. Just that you have to trust it and continue to look for it. Also, you will come to a state, in Yitzhak Hashem, where you'll find your mind naturally anticipating what needs to be said. It is a thrilling experience when you're studying a piece of Gemara and a question occurs to you, and you think about it, you can't figure out an answer, and then you look into the commentators, and one of the commentators says, "This question is very tough." I say, "Yeah, right, it's I knew it was tough." Otherwise, it could be a stupid question, read it again, the answer's on the page. And that happens also. But when you get it right, and you feel that your mind is going down that track, that's a tremendous inspiration, a tremendous confirmation of what you're doing. So different from my intellectual home and university, where the only thing that counts is something new, something no one thought of before, publish or perish. Here, that my mind achieved thinking of something old is a great success. Because if it would be new, if I made it up, it's very, very likely to be wrong. But if I said something, the Ritva says it, so then that makes your day. At any rate, these kinds of inspirations that people get, you do a mitzvah, and you get a feedback from the mitzvah, and you think, wow, I really wanted to do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted, and look, it was successful, it happened. Tell other people about it. Tell other people how wonderful it felt that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself to you in that way, and in that way use it to inspire other people. This is why these things happen. They happen in large part because they're investments through us to be able to help other people. That's what Beis Hillel is saying. We celebrate the burning of the oil, the illumination of the oil, the light that comes out of the oil, because that's what has an effect on the world around us.